podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
The Two-Footed Podcast is brought to you by EPLindex.com and our presenting sponsor, Liberty Shield. Liberty Shield is a VPN provider. A virtual privacy network allows you to go online, change your location, access things you're geo-blocked from, while keeping your data safe. So, as an example, if you are a UK expat and want access to BBC iPlayer to watch Match of the Day, or ITV Hub, or all four, when you get that message that says this content is not available in your location, a Liberty Shield VPN gets you around that block, allows you to watch whatever you want on those services, while also keeping your data safe. And it goes further than that. It allows you to open up Netflix's entire library by just changing your IP address. Liberty Shield is the #1 rated VPN provider on Trustpilot with 5-star ratings across the board. So go to libertyshield.com right now, use the code EPL25 and get either the hardware package or the software package. The hardware package is a router that you plug into your existing router, and any item you want to change the IP address on, be it your phone or your television, you connect that to the new Liberty Shield router. All other items can remain connected to your existing router. There's also a software package which is instantly downloadable to your device and you can get using straight away. Again, libertyshield.com, EPL25 for 25% off at checkout. We're also brought to you by Home of Hopcroft, a giftware and homeware company located in Scotland but shipping worldwide. Check out homeofhopcroft.co.uk and do check out the EPL Index and Anfield Index shops, which you'll find on Etsy. Use the codes EPL10 or RED10 for 10% off at checkout. And lastly, do remember to check out A Tad Predictable, hosted by Tadiwa. That podcast is on this feed before every Premier League match week. And then the EPL Roundtable, hosted by Kevin DeVries, on its own EPL Roundtable feed. So just search EPL Roundtable in your podcast device. And that's out after every match week. Now, on with the show. What's good, boys and girls? Two-Footed Podcast. Today is Monday. It is the 24th of June. I hope you're all well and had yourselves a very pleasant weekend. I am very sore today, having been at Rammstein last night and Pearl Jam the night before, but all is well. The weather was spectacular yesterday, and it's pretty good again today. So, positivity. We're going to have a look at what happened in the Euros over the weekend, have a look at what happened in the Copa America over the weekend, and then we'll carry on reviewing Premier League teams from this past season, and then obviously looking ahead to what they might do this summer, and then there'll be news and gossip. There will be the format change, just not yet. There's just other stuff going on that needs to be taken care of first. So, let's jump straight in. So, we would start with Friday's games, I believe. So, Friday, we saw Poland versus Austria, Netherlands versus France, and Ukraine, Slovakia. And I'm pretty certain that when I recorded on Friday, Ukraine, Slovakia was over. That was the early game. So Poland, France was our 5 p.m. UK time kickoff. Poland, Austria. Austria went 1-0 up through Traoré in 9 minutes. Piatek equalised. I think that had happened when I finished up. But Baumgartner scored on 66. And Arnautovic scored a penalty on 78 to give Austria a huge win and give them a really good chance of advancing to the round of 16. Really impressed by some players in that Austrian team, in particular Baumgartner and Seevold. I think those two, as 2/3 of the midfield, have been really, really good for them so far. Not impressed at all by the Poles. I understand Lewandowski's injured and hasn't been available, but still, I mean, you've got quality players in that team and you just don't seem to be making the most of who's available to you. You're very reliant on players that are a little bit past their best and probably shouldn't be regular starters for you anymore. But all things considered, I do think it's not a surprise that Austria won the game. I do think it's no surprise that Poland are going to finish this group bottom almost certainly. I think the Austrians just have a good balance in their group. A lot of very, very tactically disciplined players, a lot of strong mentalities, a lot of winners and leaders in that group. And like you look, there's quite a few of them have been through the Red Bull organization, the Red Bull system. I think it's done them a lot of good over their time. I think Ranić's doing a really good job. I really do think he's doing a very good job with the group. And I think when you consider, that they're missing David Alaba, who's probably still their best player, I think it's impressive that they gave France a hell of a game in the first game and only lost through an own goal, and then went and beat the Poles 3-1 and were absolutely good value for their win. In the last game then, it was the Netherlands versus France. We saw some changes from the Netherlands. I did quite like the way they set up in their attack with Simmons as the 10, Frimpong and Gakpo as the wingers. Not overly keen on Memphis as a 9 at this point. I'd much rather see Joshua Zirkzee play there, but it looks like Weghorst is the preferred unit for Ronald Koeman. I think that hurts them a little bit. I'd like to see Gini Wijnaldum starting in midfield, either with Reinders or with Schouten. But for me, like, Joey Vermin just looks well off the level at this international competition. So I just don't want to see him play a whole lot anymore. For France, I don't really understand the thinking behind Upamecano over Konate. I don't really understand the thinking behind Rabiot over Camavinga. And frankly, I don't really understand the thinking behind Ousmane Dembele as a starter. I know Dembele is ludicrously talented, but nobody's going to convince me that he's a better option in that team right now than Bradley Barcola or even Kingsley Coman. Obviously, they had no Mbappe for this game. The broken nose, they just wanted to kind of keep him, I'd say, for the next game and then the knockouts. But I just feel like they're underplaying their strengths in each line. You put Konate in for Upamecano. Magnon, Koundé, Konate, Saliba, Theo Hernandez is exceptionally strong. Tchouaméni, Kante, Camavinga is exceptionally strong. And then Barcola, Mbappe, Griezmann is exceptionally strong and gives you flexibility to change the shape. You can go from 4-3-3, you can go to a diamond very, very easily and just play Barcola and Mbappe as your front two. So you can be a bit more defensive and you can play on the counter if you need to be. You can still play front-footed. They just have the opportunity here to, I think, put separation between themselves and everybody else, and they're not taking it. Overall, 0-0 was a fair result. I know the Dutch were upset that their goal was disallowed. Personally, I thought it was the right decision. I think it could have been dealt with an awful lot quicker, and it was notable that it was English referees who just couldn't grasp the process of getting things done quickly, whereas every other set of VAR have done in this competition. But, you know, the PGMOL doesn't send its best and brightest because they don't have best and brightest. Moving on then to Saturday's games. So we had Belgium versus Romania, which I thought was, you know, an interesting game beforehand. We had the 2 games then in Group F as well, which were Georgia versus the Czech Republic and Turkey versus Portugal. And again, I thought they were both interesting. I was going to start with that Belgian game, even though it was the late kickoff. Romania had looked brilliant in their opening game against the Ukraine. Belgium looked dreadful against Slovakia. But from the off in this one, it was the roles reversed. Now, not that Romania looked dreadful, but Belgium just looked properly on it. They looked like they had a real concise idea of what they wanted to do. And they go 1-0 up on 2 minutes through Yuri Tielemans. It's a nice bit of play. Doku picks the ball up, drives. De Bruyne makes the overlap, takes one of the defenders away. Doku cuts back, ball into the feet of Lukaku. Does really well to take the ball, pin the defender, feed it back for Tielemans, who's one of the best strikers of the ball in Europe. And yeah, it's 1-0 after 2 minutes. From there, I mean, Lukaku has his 3rd goal of the competition ruled out. So he has 0 goals despite finding the net 3 times. This one was a marginal offside, but on 80 minutes, Kevin De Bruyne appears from nowhere. Having watched him in recent months, I was really surprised he had the legs at that point in the game to get so far forward and get away from a defender who isn't slow. And he finishes really well, to his credit. But the Lukaku goal that was disallowed would have been a peach because KDB plays a lovely pass to him. He runs onto it and finishes first time into the bottom corner. It would have been a great goal, but the KDB goal was, just as good on the scoreline. So Belgium win 2-0, gives themselves now a real chance of progression. They're currently in the automatic qualification spots ahead of their final game, which is against Ukraine, which I think they should win, but Ukraine did beat Slovakia. So this group is really hard to call at the moment. In the other game then, or the other games then, we'll come back and go through the groups in a second. Georgia won, Czech Republic won. The Czechs thought they'd scored in the first half. It was ruled out. I thought it was an accidental handball by Klosic. I mean, he shoots, it hits the goalkeeper, rebounds, hits him in the face, then hits him in the hand. It's going in anyway. I know the rule is the rule, but there has to be some common sense applied. Just before half-time then, Georgia get a penalty. It's, I think, fairly stonewall. Defender has his hand out, ball hits his hand. He does swing his hand away, but I think it's a penalty. Mikitadze steps up and scores, makes it 1-0, but on 59 minutes, Patrick Schick equalises. Not a goal he's going to, it's going to live long in the memory that he's going to watch over and over again, but a huge goal for the Czechs to give them a valuable point, and they needed the point, having lost their first game in very unfortunate circumstances. They need to have an opportunity to qualify, and the point helped them hugely. For Georgia, they didn't play as well as I think they can. I thought the point was about fair. And now both of them go into their final games knowing that they need to win. So it does put a nice little bit of extra spice on those last games. And I don't expect Georgia to beat Portugal. But having watched Turkey against Portugal, maybe the Czechs can pull something off there. Turkey lost 3-0 to Portugal. Bernardo Silva scores in 21 minutes. Nicely worked goal, ball played down the left, cut inside. Nuno Mendes gets onto it on an underlap, squares the ball across. It does take a touch off a defender. Cristiano folds over. Bernardo Silva appears and puts it in the bottom corner. And then the Turks fell apart. So Cancelo gives the ball away. Akaden plays a simple ball back to his goalkeeper, but his goalkeeper has moved to come out and get the ball, and he puts it in his own net, and it's just a calamity. It's just an absolute calamity. It didn't feel real at the time. It felt like something that was maybe like that the game had stopped. Like it almost felt like maybe, the referee's blown his whistle, so there's just been a breakdown here. But no, that was 2-0 to Portugal. And then on 56 minutes, The Portuguese right back just plays everybody on side. Bruno Fernandes and Cristiano run through. Cristiano, to his credit, does square it for Bruno, who taps home. And Portugal have a very well-deserved 3-0 lead. So Portugal have advanced. They're not certain of topping the group, or are they? Maybe they are certain of topping the group. They are. They're certain of topping the group. So they're through. So that takes care of that. We'll just go to last night's games then. We had Switzerland won, Germany won. Swiss went 1-up through Endoy. Obviously, Fulkrug equalises late on. The draw was probably the fair result. And in the other game then, Scotland 0, Hungary 1. 100-minute winner for Hungary. The game had so much stoppage time because of the horrendous injury. Which, I mean, I know I'm old, but this was even before my time, but the Battiston-Schumacher clash is infamous. And if you haven't seen it, do go and look it up. Now, it's different to this, but it gave the same kind of vibe because obviously what we saw was Varga unconscious, twitching, and it was a bit scary. But sounds like he's going to be okay. He's got some broken bones in his face and a couple of displaced fractures, but he should be okay long term. And credit to his teammates, they just kept going and going and going. And as Karl Matchett pointed out today, it was quite a cowardly performance from the Scots. One shot in the 90 minutes in a game in which they had to win. 3 shots in stoppage time, didn't work the goalkeeper at all. Played with one forward player who isn't really a number 9. And all the subs were just a little bit pointless. Just didn't really make any effort. So yeah, overall just very, very disappointed with the Scots and with how they performed and just the mindset of them. So out they go. Nobody will miss them. Hungary now have to wait and see if they qualify because Germany go through as group winners, Switzerland second, Hungary are third, and they'll be hoping that they're one of the 4 best third place teams. We have games today in Group B. We have Albania versus Spain and Croatia versus Italy. As things stand, Spain are top. They have qualified. They have won the group. Italy are second, Albania third, Croatia fourth. I fancy Spain to beat Albania. I fancy Italy and Croatia to maybe play out a draw, which would put Spain through, obviously, Italy through, but neither Albania nor Croatia advancing to the last 16. In Group C, England are top, Denmark second, Slovenia third, but level on points with the Danes, and everything is level. Goals scored, goals conceded, and they drew with each other. So a lot rides on their final games, but Denmark have the easier game playing Serbia, while Slovenia have to play England. In Group D, we have the Netherlands top, France second, Austria third, Poland fourth. Poland are going to go out. Austria, I think a draw against the Dutch would be a great result. Now, it would probably mean that they finish, well, it would mean they finish third, but it would mean the Dutch finish second, I would imagine, because you'd expect France to beat Poland in their final game. In Group E, all 4 teams have 4 points. So it is going to come down to the results of the final game. Slovakia versus Romania, I fancy Romania to win that one. Ukraine, Belgium, I fancy Belgium to win that. I expect Belgium to top the group with Romania finishing second, if I'm being honest. And then in the final group, it is Portugal top and through, Turkey in second, Czech Republic in third, Georgia in fourth, and the Czechs have the easier game facing Turkey rather than facing Portugal. But potentially the Portuguese could rest a bunch of players, which might give the Georgians an opportunity to potentially spring the upset. And it would be great if they could. And if either they or the Czech Republic can win, they could both, well, to be fair, if both win, they'll both go through. And Turkey would miss out. So Turkey need at least a point. at least a point, or they risk falling out. So that should be interesting as well. As things stand, the 4 teams that would advance would be Austria, Slovakia, Hungary, Slovenia, and Albania and the Czech Republic would be the ones that miss out. But these things can change very, very quickly and likely will change. So for now, we know that Spain will play their round of 16 game in Cologne. Germany will play in Dortmund. Portugal will play in Frankfurt. And Switzerland will play in Berlin. The likely opponent for the Swiss is Italy. The likely opponent for Germany, I think, is Denmark. Spain and Portugal will play third place teams, so we'll see how that shakes out. Right, on to the Copa America, which has been pretty good. Been pretty good so far. We've already had some upsets. So in Group A, Argentina beat Canada 2-0. Alvarez and Lautaro Martinez. Peru and Chile played out a 0-0 draw. In Group B, we had an upset where Venezuela beat Ecuador. Ecuador did have a man sent off, but did go 1-0 up after that through Sarmiento, owned by Brighton, spent last year on loan at West Brom and then Ipswich. But Cadiz and Bello got goals for Venezuela in the second half to give them a huge win. Mexico beat Jamaica 1-0. Artiego with the only goal of the game in the 69th minute. In Group C, we had the United States beating Bolivia 2-0. Christian Pulisic and Folarin Balogun with the goals. And then last night we had Uruguay beating Panama 3-1. Max Araujo scored the opener. Darwin Núñez scored the second. Vini got the third. And then Murillo pulled a late consolation goal back for Panama deep into stoppage time. We have 2 games today. We have Colombia versus Paraguay, and we have Brazil versus Costa Rica. So they should both be really good games. It'd be really interesting to see how Brazil look, how they line up, what the approach is. There's a lot of skepticism towards that Brazilian team right now. You know, can they score enough goals? Is the defence going to be solid enough? The confidence seems to be around the midfield group, but we'll wait and see. And Colombia-Paraguay should just be interesting because Colombian games can be quite fun and they've got some very interesting players. So that's where we stand with our international competitions so far. And I'll be back after the break. See you after this. Right, welcome back. So the next team on our list is Manchester United, and what a season they had. The worst Premier League campaign that they've had since the beginning of the Premier League, an embarrassing European campaign, a pretty embarrassing League Cup campaign, but they did win the FA Cup, so, you know, there was silverware at the end of the year. Now, last summer, they signed Mason Mount, who was injured most of the year and not good when he played. They signed Onana, who started off dreadfully and then progressed to just being flat out poor, which was an improvement. But, you know, they tried to spin it that he was playing well, but he genuinely wasn't. And they spent massive money on Rasmus Højlund, who is very young, but was clearly nowhere close to ready for such a move. Following the trend of Erik ten Hag signings, there's been no success with his signings. There really hasn't. He has spent an awful lot of money and he has not spent it well. And that's why, you know, when he says, I don't have the players to play the way I want to, I just think it's the weirdest excuse, because you're the one spending all this money on all these players that aren't good enough or aren't ready or don't fit what you apparently want to do. The big notable departure last summer was obviously David De Gea, who'd been there a long time. But they did sell some other players. They sold Alex Telles, they sold Fred, they sold Dean Henderson, Teden Mengi, Eric Bailly. I'm not sure what they got for him. I'd imagine it was peanuts, but, you know, they sold a lot of players. They moved on Phil Jones, and then signed Johnny Evans, who signed a 2-week contract to train with the team so he could get himself fit in the hopes of attracting a contract from a championship team. And then they extended it to a month so he could go on pre-season with them. And then he ended up being arguably their best centre-back across the course of the season, which is both bizarre and very worrying if you're a Manchester United fan. Now, the FA Cup, it was a great success for them. But we need to start with the league here. They beat Wolves 1-0 on the opening day and were very, very fortunate to beat Wolves. Everybody remembers Onana coming out and clattering into the Wolves striker on the set piece. That should have been a penalty. Then they lose 2-0 away to Spurs. Then they beat Forest 3-2, having been 2-0 down. Very, very fortunate to win that game. They lose at Arsenal. They were unlucky in that one. Gabriel fouls Evans as Evans comes out to close Declan Rice. Rice scores the second goal to put Arsenal ahead. Obviously, the third goal does seal it, but if the second goal doesn't go in, the third one likely doesn't either. Then they got outplayed in pretty dramatic fashion by Brighton. Then they beat Burnley 1-0. Then they lost at home to Crystal Palace. Then they beat Brentford 2-1. They were 1-0 down for a large portion of that game and scored in the 93rd and 97th minute. Then they beat Sheffield United 2-1 with Diogo Dalot scoring an absolute worldie. Then they lost 3-0 to City. Then they beat Fulham 1-0 with a last-minute goal from Bruno Fernandes. They beat Luton 1-0 with Victor Lindelof scoring a rare goal. And then they hammered Everton. Garnacho, Rashford and Martial scoring in a 3-0 win. If you watch that game, it wasn't a 3-0 game. Everton could easily have won that game. United weren't particularly good. Everton just didn't take their chances. Then they lost 1-0 away to Newcastle. They beat Chelsea 2-1 at home. They lost at Bournemouth. Somehow they got a draw at Anfield despite getting battered. They lost at West Ham. They beat Villa 3-2. They lost away to Forest. They drew at home at Spurs. Then they beat Wolves 4-3 away from home with Kobbie Mainoo scoring in the 97th minute. They beat West Ham comfortably. They beat Villa 2-1 away, really good win. They beat Luton 2-1 away, but could easily have ended in a draw. They were 2-0 up after 7 minutes, and Luton were the better team for probably an hour. Then they lost at home to Fulham. They lost away to City. They beat Everton at home with 2 penalties. They drew 1-1 with Brentford. Mason Mount scored in the 96th minute to rescue a point. They lost 4-3 away to Chelsea. Then they drew 2-2 at home with Liverpool. They drew 2-2 away to Brentford. They beat Sheffield United 4-2 at home. They weren't particularly impressive. They needed 2 late goals in that 81 and 85 to win that one. They drew 1-1 at home with Burnley. Anthony got them back into it. They lost 4-0 away to Crystal Palace. They lost 1-0 at home to Arsenal. But then they ended the season with 2 straight wins. They beat Newcastle 3-2 at home and then went and beat Brighton 2-0 away on the final day. So they finished 8th. They won 18 games. They lost 14 games. And their goal difference was -1 in the league, which is pretty shocking for a team with that much money put into it. In the FA Cup, they beat Wigan 2-0 away. They beat Newport 4-2 away. They beat Nottingham Forest 1-0 away with a late Casemiro goal. Then they beat Liverpool 4-3 at home. Diallo scores in stoppage time of extra time. Having been battered for most of the game, Anthony scored in the 87th minute to send it to extra time. Then they beat Coventry on penalties, having gone 3-0 up. They threw that away. And then they beat Manchester City in the FA Cup final. 2 goals in 9 minutes from Garnacho and Mainoo. Despite getting pummeled for the most part after that, they managed to hold on and lift the cup, and fair play. In the EFL Cup, they beat Palace 3-0 and then lost to Newcastle 3-0 at home. Now, so through 3 competitions, we're looking at a goal difference of +1, +3, +4, +5, +6. Yeah. No, +6 between all 3 competitions. In the Champions League, they lost away to Bayern, lost at home to Galatasaray, did beat Copenhagen at home, then lost in Copenhagen, drew away to Galatasaray and lost at home to Bayern. So they took 4 points from their 6 games, conceded 15 goals and finished with a -3 goal difference. So across the course of the season, across, what are we looking at, 44, 46, 50, 52 games? Yeah, 52 games. They finished with a goal difference of +3. But conceded a ludicrous amount. Like an absolutely ludicrous amount of goals. Like you're looking at 9 conceded in the FA Cup, which is their best competition. 3 in the EFL Cup. That's 12. 15 in the Champions League is 27. And in the Premier League, 58. So 85 goals conceded across all competitions. That's dreadful. Absolutely dreadful. For a team that has pumped so much money into their squad. Now, there were a couple of positives to take from this past season. There were really only 2. No, you know what? There was 3. There was 3 positives that they can take from this season and move forward with, and hope that these things continue to develop. So one is Garnacho, 19 years of age. This was his first full season as a regular or semi-regular starter. He plays in 36 Premier League games, that's up from 19 the year before, 50 in all competitions, that's up from 34 the year before. He scores 10 goals, but more than that, he gave United a real outlet with his pace, with his determination, with his aggression, with his pressing, which I was really impressed with how good he was off the ball. Very, very impressed by a lot of what I saw from him. Now, whether or not he develops into an elite level player, we'll have to wait and see. But there was a lot of promise this past season in a very dysfunctional team. Kobbie Mainoo is obviously the next one. This was his first season, really. He played 1 league game the year before. I think he played 3 in all competitions. This past season, he played 32 games, including 24 in the Premier League, and many of them were starts. Scored 5 goals, but what he does is he knits things together for them in midfield. Now, I'm not sure he's ready to be starting week in, week out if you want to be a serious team. But if he's your 3rd midfielder, your 4th midfielder, and you're trying to develop him properly, I think you've got a hell of a player there. Still only 19, and he doesn't turn 20 until next year, next April. Garnacho's 20 in a week. So that's number 2. And then the 3rd one is another young player. It's Amad Diallo. Now, he didn't play nearly as much. He only played 12 games in all competitions. But he'd only played 9 for United in the 3 years that they'd owned him prior. And I thought when he was given opportunities, he started to show why they spent so much money on him. And I thought when they went with him one side and Garnacho the other, there was a lovely balance between what the two of them offered, similar enough to what we're seeing with the Spanish team right now. With Diallo as the kind of Yamal, come and get the ball to feet, turn, start to create things, and Garnacho as the Nico Williams outlet option. Neither of them, I don't think, are as good as the 2 Spanish lads, and I don't think they've got the same ceiling as the 2 Spanish lads, but the principle of it is there. Bruno is the 10, Højlund is the 9. Now, the problem is Marcus Rashford's a better footballer than either of them, but he had such a poor season. It's very hard to know what to do with him. And when you start to really look at their team, and I've said this a few times, I do wonder if maybe selling Bruno is the best option, because age-wise, he doesn't really fit in with the timeline of these younger players, including Rasmus Højlund, who you'd put into that same group, because he's 21 as well, or maybe he's 22 by now. But, like, if you're United, are you better off trying to thread this needle of, you know, we're just going to be competent and hope that we can sneak into the top 4? Or are you better off kind of getting rid of the older, higher paid, underperforming players, and then someone like Bruno, who isn't underperforming by any stretch, he's comfortably the best player at the club, but he is older and he is on big money and he wants a new contract, and that contract is going to be very expensive because Bruno turns 30 this year. He's going to want a big deal because it'll be his last big deal. I do just wonder, would United be better off selling him and sort of looking at anybody who's 28 and older, so capping it at 27. We're not going to have anybody older than that. Bar maybe like a Tom Heaton or a Johnny Evans, but they're not going to play a bunch. We're going to have them around for leadership, for mentorship, for the mindset, you know, and rebuilding your club around young players and finding the best young prospects. And, you know, you'd still have some young veterans in Rashford, in Mount, who we know is a good player and can show an awful lot more. But, you know, maybe you keep Binder as a backup, right? He's 26, makes sense to keep him. Now, personally, I'd like to sell Onana, and he's 28, so that's another reason to sell him. But you probably have to try and rebuild his value a little bit. So you keep him for a year, but you put him on the list of players that's going to move on. Lindelof, you move him on. 29, he'll be 30 soon. He's not good enough to be a starter. If you want to keep him for another year just as a backup, fair enough, but keep him on the list of players to go. Maguire should go. The Gnome, I think as a left back, he could work very well under the right manager. I think as a centre back, he's just going to become a massive liability because teams are going to target him more and more in the air. Move on, Bruno. Martial's gone. You keep Rashford. You keep Højlund. I would keep Malacia as the alternative to Martinez at left back, so you have an attacking one and a defensive one. Move on Eriksen. Keep Diallo. Keep Garnacho. Move on Casemiro. Varane is leaving. Keep Delot for certain. He had a great season for them. Anthony you would sell because he's just terrible, and get whatever you can. You keep Tom Heaton for leadership and just a veteran presence. Try and find a buyer for Luke Shaw. Anyone will do. Wan-Bissaka, I thought he had a decent enough season, and I like the fact he can play both flanks, so you probably keep him. Keep Evans again for leadership. McTominay, I think you move on. I think if you could find a good offer for him, you move him on. And the likes of, you know, Mainu, obviously you keep. Shortire, maybe you try and see if he's up to the level and give him some opportunities. Kumbuala the same. I believe Forson is leaving, so that's him out the window. And Wheatley's another young player they've got. I'd look to bring back Sancho. And I'd maybe be looking at him as the 10. Because I think that's what he would be in the Premier League, is a 10. Bring back Palestri. Again, Brandon Williams, he can play both sides, and I like that. I think that's valuable, so maybe keep him. Donny van de Beek, you've been off. Dan Gore, did I read he's leaving? I'm not sure. Hannibal Mejbri's an interesting one. He's not the most talented player in the world, but I really like him because I think he works incredibly hard. I think he puts in a proper shift. So I think I'd actually bring him back and keep him. because he cares. And the problem for United is that so many of these players just don't care. They just don't care at all. So I'd look to bring him back. And then, unfortunately, with Mason Greenwood, there's no doubting the talent, but it cannot be a thing where he's associated with your club. So you've got to get him gone as well. And then you look through the rest of your academy, see who's ready to at least contribute even as a squad player and get them involved. And that's what you target. You target ideally players between 18, 19 and 23, 24 with the odd kind of 25, 26-year-old. If you can get like a really, really good one at a good price who's ready to explode, like Liverpool did with Salah and Mane and Firmino, people like that, you do that. Or if there's a Van Dijk out there at 26, 27, if there's somebody that's just going to be an absolute game changer for you, then you break that rule. But otherwise, you go for players 24 and under. And you try and build something that's going to last and going to grow together and develop and not be stupid. I mean, I look at their team right now. Right, they're not going to buy a goalkeeper this summer. Delo is good enough to start. I think they think Shaw is still good enough to start, and Ten Hag thinks Martinez is good enough to start at centre-back. So they'll be looking for one centre-back. They need a defensive midfielder. They'll play Manu as the other one. I think they need two midfielders. I think they need two centre-backs, two midfielders, and a different type of number 9. Just somebody who can be a bit more experienced and a bit more of a poacher. Maybe someone like Guirassy. Affordable, wages won't be mental, won't get too upset if he's not playing every single game, could be a decent mentor for Højlund. Wouldn't touch the wings. You need some depth at fullback. Well, no, you wouldn't actually, because you have Martinez and Malacia on one side, and you have Delo and Wan-Bissaka, and maybe Brandon Williams sticks about. I think you're set at fullback. You need two starting centre-backs. Keep Kambwala, keep Evans, and I'd look for three centre-backs then, to be honest. 3 centre-backs, 2 starters in midfield, a rotation option up front. I think you're set in the line behind. You've got Sancho can play all across, Diallo can play left and 10, right and 10, Rashford can play left, right and 9, Garnacho can play both sides, Mount can play 10 and left. You're set there. You don't need to do anything in that area. You don't need to go and buy another attacking player other than that striker. And Guirassy, I think, with his buyout would be an affordable value option. He's a little bit older than what I've been suggesting, but needs most in the short term. And then, go and sort your defence out. And as I said earlier, I'd be looking to move Onana on and bring in a really reliable goalkeeper, someone that can grow with your team. He's 28. That's not going to be the case for him. I don't expect him to do anything good this summer, though. I mean, the fact that they took weeks to make a decision on Ten Hag and then decided to keep him, it is just bizarre. I've never seen a situation like it. I think United fans think Ineos are their saviour. I'm here to tell them that they're not. Look at what they've done with Nice. Look how they've run Nice. That's the indicators of what they're going to look for. They're going to look to run it as cheaply as they can and maximise the money they can make off it. That's how Jim Ratcliffe became so rich. I'd be surprised if Ten Hag sees out the season. I think the plan has to be that right now, you're keeping him. You're not going to spend big money. I wouldn't, unless it's a young player like a Branthwaite or somebody like that long term can be part of something else. I wouldn't let Ten Hag pick a single player this summer. I wouldn't let him have anyone he's worked with before. I would be looking at getting in players that are going to be malleable and then starting to scout who my next manager is. And once I figure that out, you go and approach that person. And if they agree to the job, then you start to scout for what they're going to need, for the individual bits and pieces that they'll need. In the interim, you only sign players that are going to be flexible. And I will say, I do have concerns about someone spending big money on Branthwaite. I think he's very, very good. He did a really impressive season. We've never seen what he looks like defending space. And the last team who paid enormous money for centre-back, who we didn't know if they could defend space, was United and Maguire. And look how that worked out. At Hull and at Leicester and for England, he looked really good in a compact defensive shape. As soon as he was asked to go and defend space, he just looked like a liability. Right, I'll be back after this. Right, welcome back. So, as you probably have noticed over the last few days, there's been some strange transactions made between Premier League clubs. So, obviously, Villa signed Ian Maatsen. I think that's a brilliant deal for them. 37.5 million. Paid in installments. They've paid over the buyout to be able to spread it out over the 5 years of his contract. At the same time, Chelsea have signed Omari Kellyman for 19 million. And that's a bit of an odd one. He's a very highly regarded young player, but he played twice for Villa. He was signed from Derby in 2022. He was part of that very impressive Derby academy. Then when they were in desperate financial trouble and basically all their best young players started to leave, Villa nabbed Kellyman for 600,000. And after 2 games in the league, I think 6 overall, but 2 games in the league, Chelsea decided to spend 19 million. Now, I think we all know he's not a 19 million pound footballer at this point, but this is clearly a nudge, nudge, wink, wink that's going on between multiple Premier League clubs. We've seen Everton and Villa basically do a swap where Lewis Dobbin went to Villa and Tim Orogbunam went to Everton. 9 million apiece, which means they can put 9 million on their books now as money coming in and then spread the 9 million spent across 5 years, which is less than 2 million a year. So they're making 7 million on this year's book, on this year's finances. And the same thing, obviously, with the Kellyman deal. So Villa can put 19 million down as money coming in for this summer and then spread the Maatsen deal at 5.5 million across the next few seasons. So Villa will show money spent for this year as 6.25 million-ish, but money brought in as 28 million. So that's 22 million thereabouts of profit for this year on these transactions. And likewise with Chelsea, they can put the Maatsen money on as now and then spread the Kellyman money out over 5 years. There's likely to be a couple more. It looked like we were going to see another one with Dominic Calvert-Lewin going to Newcastle and maybe Yankuba Minta going to Everton. But it looks like that one's fallen apart, with Minta seemingly set to go to Lyon now in a deal that will help Newcastle in terms of their profit and sustainability, but doesn't help Everton, obviously. I think we're going to see more of this. We've seen this with a number of other clubs, obviously with Villa as well. Douglas Luiz is leaving. He's going to Juventus. They're making 28 million profit on that, but I'd be willing to bet that what they're actually doing is they're doing them as 2 separate deals. So they get 50 million for Douglas Luiz, and then if they spend 22 million on the 2 players that they're getting, which they can amortize across 5 years. So they're basically paying 4.4 million per year for the next 5. So they declare that on next year's books because that deal can't be completed until July 1st. They can put that down as a 45 million plus profit. Everton are in trouble. The Calvert-Lewin deal was looking like it was going to be vital for them. If that falls apart, I don't know. Newcastle, they have some issues, but we'll wait and see what happens. There might be a situation where they can sell 1 or 2 more. Chelsea seem confident they're going to avoid a P and S violation. But unless they've got extra hotels and stuff to sell, I don't know. I know they're talking about selling the women's team. They might sell the women's team to themselves and do stuff like that. That'd be just really strange. But we'll see what happens. But it's certainly led to a lot of conversation from different people about whether or not it's the right way to do things. I don't really see a big problem with it, to be honest. Don't really see a big problem with it. UEFA say there was no delay in the time taken to treat Barnabas Vargas after the head injury he suffered. I think it's pretty clear there was. Like, Dominic Szoboszlai had to go and grab the stretcher and drag it onto the pitch. And then eventually treatment began. It was just very strange. I think there was a delay. Now, it seems like everything's going to be okay, so that's at least a positive. We've got the gossip then. We'll go through that. There's 3 days' worth. Manchester United and Tottenham are two clubs interested in Jonathan David. Very funny story at the weekend where my good friend Fabrication has been spoofing away about Jonathan David for about 2 years now, and yet it was David Ornstein that had the exclusive story about Jonathan David in talks with Chelsea, or Jonathan David's people in talk with Chelsea. Wolves want up to 45 million for Max Kilman. I think that's fair enough for an English centre-back who's left-footed, especially if Everton want 70. Now, I wouldn't pay it, but I think it's fair for them to ask it. West Ham's offer was 25 million. So Douglas Luiz is closing in on a move to Juventus. Yeah, we've had that. Manchester United have made initial contact with Lille over Eleni Yoro. They're not getting him. Lazio prepared to offer Greek goalkeeper Christos Mandas as well as a 15 million fee in a bid to sign Mason Greenwood. Okay. Southampton are plotting a move for Bobby De Cordova-Reid. That could make sense. Chelsea and Bayern are showing interest in Mark Gui. That's the young Barcelona striker. He's got a 6 million release clause. I think there was reports that Chelsea might have agreed to pay it, which, 6 million is nothing. Over the course of 5 years, it's for 1.2 million a year. You can throw that on your books, no problem. Aaron Wan-Bissaka is nearing a move to Galatasaray. That will be interesting. Obviously, he's good friends with Zaha, who's there, so that could make sense. Manchester United are concerned they will not be able to lure Desiree Doué to Old Trafford with the French club setting a high ask price. They don't need him. Silly move. He's a very talented player, though, so maybe you just buy him. And look, you could sell Sancho, which they probably want to do anyway. Roma are set to hold talks with Man City over Sergio Gomez. That's one that has been rumoured for a few weeks now. West Ham and Brentford are interested in Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Could see him making sense for both, to be fair. It's quite similar to Youssef En-Nesyri, who Lopetegui had at Sevilla, and Brentford are set to lose Tony, so I could see that, even though they have a striker brought in. But then it is football transfers, so it's probably just garbage. AC Milan are interested in Pierre-Emile Højbjerg. We've been hearing that for 12 months. Everton want to recruit Iliman Ndiaye from Marseille. I think he'd be open to that move. Didn't go brilliantly at Marseille for him. Bayern Munich have discussed making a move for Hakan Çalhanoğlu. I think that'd be a really poor move for them. Just his age, you need to start rebuilding properly. Sevilla are in talks to sign Albert Samuel Lokonga on loan from Arsenal. Yet another one of Edu and Arteta's failed signings. Newcastle are closing in on the signing of Dominic Calvert-Lewin. That's from The Guardian. Who wrote that? Jacob Steinberg. And yet today we're told the deal has fallen apart. So Jacob Steinberg once again wrong. Newcastle have made a player plus cash bid for Max Kilman. Wolves have rejected an offer from Newcastle, who also asked about Pedro Neto. Chelsea held talks with the representatives of Jonathan David. Man City and Manchester United made late moves to sign Michael Olise, who is set to join Bayern Munich. Interesting. I don't believe it because it's from the Mirror, but maybe they did. Marcus Rashford wants to repair his fractured relationship with Erik ten Hag after Manchester United confirmed he will remain as manager. Everton are braced for another bid from United for Jared Branthwaite. Can't be bothered with that. That's nonsense. Everton are in talks of signing Kuba Minta. Newcastle rebuffed interest from Liverpool. They didn't actually. That's not true. Aston Villa have asked about the availability of Real Sociedad's Brais Mendes. He's a good player. Don't know if he's good enough to start in the Premier League for a high-end team, but he's a good player. Tottenham have no intention of allowing Real Madrid or any other club to sign Cristian Romero this summer. Brighton are keen on Ariz Albert Yilmaz, who's playing up front for Turkey, but he is a winger for Galatasaray. Juventus could offer Federico Chiesa as part of a potential deal for Mason Greenwood. That sounds like nonsense to me. Xavi Simons has told PSG he wants to leave. PSG apparently willing to let him go on loan again. Both Bayern Munich and RB Leipzig are interested. Joshua Kimmich is unlikely to extend his contract, and the German club are open to selling. I think they should sell it. I think he's past his best. Leeds' bid to make Joe Rodon's loan move permanent is set to collapse, as he is likely to join a Premier League team with Leicester, Ipswich and Southampton all interested. Now, it is Football Insider, so, Inter Miami want to add Rafael Varane to their ranks. That would make sense. And Manchester United are ready to wait another 9 months for Dan Ashworth to start work as their new sporting director, which again points to the fact that Ineos don't want to spend big money. Bayern are interested in signing Bernardo Silva. I doubt it after getting Elise. Borussia Dortmund are very close to reaching a verbal agreement with Pascal Gross. Mikel Arteta could risk upsetting some of his senior players if Arsenal move for Nico Williams because of his wage demands. Arsenal are paying huge wages anyway, so I doubt it. Chelsea are also interested in Williams. Chelsea are interested in anybody with a pulse who can kick a ball. And Liverpool, Manchester City and Arsenal are among the clubs still in consideration for Joshua Kimmich if he leaves Bayern. You're all right, thanks. Adrian is close to finalising a move to Real Sociedad. It's actually Real Betis that he's looking to go to. Chelsea have moved to sign Max Bayer from Hoffenheim. He's a good player. Doesn't solve their problems, though. Ruud van Nistelrooy, who people had thought was going to take the Burnley job, has now been approached to be part of Erik ten Hag's staff at Manchester United. Newcastle are planning to sell Callum Wilson if they can agree a deal for Calvert-Lewin, which they have not been able to do. AC Milan have joined the race for Calvert-Lewin. I doubt it. Lyon have entered the race for Yankuba Minta. That seems like where he'll go. Now, the only thing is, last summer, Lyon didn't buy him. So, if you watched any of Lyon this past season, you will have seen a very, very exciting young player playing ostensibly from the right, a left-footed winger who would cut inside and create chances. Now, he was inconsistent because he's a young player in Ernest Nuama, who's 20 years of age. Now, he's owned by Molenbeek. Molenbeek are owned by John Textor, who also owns Lyon, who also owns part of Crystal Palace. There's an option to buy for 25 million plus 5 million in add-ons. So, is it a thing that they've decided he's not quite ready? So they're going to send him back to Molenbeek for another year to develop, look to bring in Minta and hope that he kicks on and is the one. That's quite interesting. Because I don't know if Nuama will be all that excited about playing for Molenbeek. Because he turned them bigger clubs to go there knowing he was going to get loaned to Lyon. Minta is reported to have agreed personal terms with one of the many clubs that have shown interest in him. Nottingham Forest have discussed a deal for Dutch defender Lamar Bogaard. He's not bad. He's a young player at 20 years of age at Villa. And that could be another one of these moves. We might see another one of these moves now between two clubs with PSR problems. This is weird. Crystal Palace have a replacement lined up who is even better than Michael Elise. Now, that's from TalkSport. And I'm curious to see so Darren Ambrose, who obviously played for Palace, I've reached out to one of my sources at Palace. They said the club has a replacement in mind who can potentially become better than Elise in the long run. I have doubts. Like, not saying they won't get another great player, but Elise is very special. Now, maybe it is someone like maybe Minta. But I'm going to be really interested to see who they replace him with. They've done really good business in recent years. I'll be really interested to see who they replace Elise with. And that's going to do me for today, folks. I will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Sports Social Podcast Network.